So this is about the title is "Don't Dream, Make the Web API of Your Dreams Become Real." And people, when I talked about this, was what the Frühstück is about. So if you think, what is this? This is maybe, or if I go too fast, please trim me down because when I'm tired, I go too fast. So this is maybe the most simplest interpretation of how a JavaScript developer works with a browser, right? You have some JavaScript, then you have some kind of black box, and at the end you get some JavaScript out again. So you call a JavaScript function, it does some magic, and you get JavaScript again. And actually, the magic in between is C++. So how many of you are JavaScript developers? How many of you like C++? OK, so there's some kind of tension like, I want to live in this world, but as soon as it gets here on, I just miss 1/3, that's all good. So the way developers and browser interact is this way. The developer comes along, and he uses the browser. It's nice. It has API, whatever. You can do whatever. And then also developers tend to they have great ideas. So you have the developer, you have an idea, and then there's the browser, which is basically this kind of thing that runs your idea, right? But the problem is sometimes the idea doesn't work because there's something missing. And actually, that's not good enough. It's way harder. It's like you're developing, you have the idea, and you hit the wall because you're missing APIs and other things that pretend you to make your idea happen. And that's pretty sad. So Brian LaRue had at Alex.js last week a good thing about the web and what it's capable of. And this is, quoting him, if the web doesn't do something right now, it's not because it can't. It's not like it's impossible. It just means we haven't gone around doing it yet. So it really means, imagine that the web can do everything. I mean, this is this Mozilla, the web is the platform, BootG, Firefox OS thing, maybe. But also, if you would now be on this other track, WebRTC, what's possible there? I really think that you can do a lot on the web, but what keeps us back as a developer in JavaScript is this C++ thing in the middle. Because what actually, OK, my slides are the wrong order. Because actually JavaScript developers are pretty much open source guys. And mostly if there's some issue or thing, they come up with ideas to collaborate. And for JavaScript, it works pretty well. But for C++, there's some kind of tension. I skipped this. I revert over. So the web is this kind of open thing, right? And JavaScript likes open source. Who's of you have been at Node Helicopter? Was it awesome? OK, so Node Helicopter is like you're controlling drones with Node with an open stack because the protocol is open, so you can control the drone. And what then happened is it was like an event of where you put all kind of open source software together. So you have WebSockets, you got the web, you got new device APIs, and then you started to put in like open face detection stuff so that the drone can follow you. So JavaScript people really just hack together whatever to come along. So and it's also the question, so if you think about web APIs, if you have the JavaScript developers being this kind of openness, can you think of web APIs as being some kind of open source that you could hack as well? I mean, imagine that. That would be awesome, right? So this is the thing that I wrote for my talk introduction. It's basically a person saying, hey, you know, there's something not working on the web. There's this border I just draw, and I hit it really much, and I cannot do anything about it, right? And developers are saying, yeah, you know, the web is open, so actually you can change it. And then, yeah, I cannot fork the web from GitHub and just change it, right? But what you can do is you either jump on its back or you propose some ideas. Or what you also can do is you just grab a browser from GitHub, you implement things there. And once it ships in that browser and it's good, other browsers adopt it, it becomes a spec, and everybody's happy. So that's what you're doing, and love, peace, and everybody. So sorry for wrong thing. So the question might be, should developers at all make specs? Because that's what it boils down to, right? If you want to change things, at the end, you got to come up with a spec. And I think, no, developers should not make spec. Because writing spec is this kind of putting natural language in a mathematical way that nobody can misinterpret it. And as complicated it sounds, it is, I guess. There are only very few people that has this kind of crazy mindedness where they understand where there's really small pitfalls. So who of you read the EM scripting specification, or at least parts of it? Okay, so I cannot go with that example. But basically there, if you look at it, things look trivial to you, but it's really like 7 or 8 steps, really precise, defined what's happening. And you think, yeah, come on, it doesn't have to be that way. But it turns out, if you would not, people would end up in implementing things differently, and that hurts. So you really got to be precise. And developers, as good as they are, they don't have this kind of mindness. So, but the other thing is, should developers propose ideas? And that's definitely yes. Because developers are the people that interact with the browser all day and that come with this new kind of ideas from outside. Some let's say, agency gets a job, and the person there doesn't know the web, so he just wants something to happen. And he doesn't care if it's possible or not, so he just thinks out of the box. And then the developers is, okay, now I got to implement it and it's not possible. What if there would be blah, 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 and we could do it? So he would maybe face there's an issue, he can recognize it, and then make some kind of proposal to implement a spec out of it. And that's actually part of what I'm going to talk to. And should developers also implement a thing? Well, if you want to. I mean, it's open source. The browsers are open source, so you can do. And I'm going to talk a little bit in my talk about how to make sure this won't end up as a big pain for you. To make sure you want to basically fill this gap about C++, and we all make new APIs and a better place on the web. So a little bit background of me. I worked on Bespin, so we inverted the colors, so it's awesome icons. It then got into Ace, so this is the editor that's powering Cloud9. Who else use Cloud9? Okay, oh, not that much. Then I hacked on Firefox, Web Console, stuff, developer tools. Then I got to the ETH, so I'm studying physics in my 5th bachelor degree on physics. And then I started working on PDF.JS, which should be here. Oh, no, yeah. So PDF.JS is actually, who of you know PDF.JS? Okay, that's more. So PDF.JS is it's just a website, and this is actually just an iframe, and it just loads. So just to demonstrate it more, I reload, and it loads, and you can do selection, and it looks pretty stupid now with inverted colors. But the thing is, we really want to have this as a native thing, so it also means we need to do printing. And actually, printing on the web is not as good as it could be, but we have to do it because we want to have native experience and come in the browser. So what I worked on is a new spec for the canvas element that basically lets you define the content while printing, and also means that what you draw actually stays a vector format. So you see, we can zoom in, and it's still text, it's not rasterized, and you also can copy this kind of things. So that's pretty cool, and it's going to solve a lot of problems, I guess. But I won't go into this because what I want to concentrate on is how could you maybe do this kind of things. So I was working on printing and try to solve this. So first idea was, can we use maybe SVG to solve the problem? And we did some research, and we've proven it doesn't work for us. So we need some new API to make printing work with a canvas element. And I was young, you know, and me was just like, yeah, let's do this. I always want to do C++, see how the browser works internally, blah, blah, blah. So you might ask, I'm a Mozilla person somewhat. Is this Gecko specific? If I'm WebKit guy, should I leave this talk? I think you shouldn't. Because what I'm going to tell you, I think, applies to other browsers as well. So it's general purpose. I don't know about this now. So let's get started. So there are two things, basically, how you can approach getting something new into the browser. So the first thing, you have the idea, and then either you code something up, which gets shipped in the browser, and then you make a spec, or you make the idea, it becomes a spec, and then it gets implemented. In our case, we need this thing as soon as possible, because PDF.JS should be as soon as possible, the default PDF viewer in Firefox. So we said, okay, we go with this idea, we code it, and if it's good enough, we relaunch it or make it a spec. So the first thing, if you come up with a new idea and you propose it, is basically to research, to check or whether something else does the thing already on the web platform. Because the cool thing about the web is everything is only made once, and there's not too much duplication. And maybe there's some bizarre way how you can do the thing you're looking for, and it just takes a lot of time to make specs, so there's no sense to do it twice. Also, when you have some kind of idea, make a sanity check if it makes sense for the web runtime. So one thing, maybe you would want to implement an API that makes unicorns flying around and makes your name, but that doesn't make sense. Or you want to make cross-script origin requests, but it doesn't make sense for security reasons. So then you would say, well, it's really just not possible on the browser because security is the thing the browser is built onto. OK, so let's say you have some kind of idea. There's this kind of use case you have. So then you would do an API draft, which is basically you think about what should be in there, what is the use case that you want to solve. So it should be use case driven, that you say, these are my cases, and the API needs to have this kind of scope that we can solve it. And then if you think about an API and you come up with it, you should try to keep it small, simple, and general purpose. The smaller the API, the easier it's to implement and to specify. If it's simple, other people can use it as well. And general purpose is always good for the web because you might have other ideas, and if it's just too specific for one use case, it's not useful. But when it's general purpose, you can reuse it for other stuff as well on the web. Then if you have some kind of API, you might want to prototype it or aka write some dream code. So just write some code as if the API would exist, and then see if it makes sense. Because just have an idea in your mind and not really done any kind of code writing sometimes really misleads you. And if you just write some code that's actually not running, but still there, it's pretty good to check where this all works. Then you want to put your documentation, the API draft that you done somewhere on the web, GitHub, Wiki, whatever. You want to share it because maybe using Twitter, Google+, some meetups, some other colleagues from a company, because what you want to get is feedback. To see maybe you missed something in the research part, maybe there's an easier way to do the API, maybe some pitfalls, security issues. And once you have some feedback and you feel like, OK, this is not too bad, you can go to step 3, which is doing some kind of proposal. So here, once more, a proposal is not really a spec. So you might have like examples and other kinds of thing there, but it's not 100% precise yet. So I don't think people expect that from you. But just get the idea out there and maybe some simple things. So the proposal maybe would include these kind of things. So what is your use case motivation for this? What are some details of the API? How should it work? Your rationality for it? Why you think this is useful? And why is there no other way to do it simpler? The WhatWeG, there's a link which also is it's a process for adding new features to specifications, which also has some kind of nice points for this kind of thing. And then there's a question, where do you put it? So how many use the WhatWeG? OK, no one. So it stands for Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. It's an insane name, but it's actually what happened. The W3C was not really up to continue working on HTML5, what we now call HTML5. So Mozilla Opera stepped back from W3C and said, this is not going to work. We want the web to evolve and start some kind of new mailing list together with Apple at that time. And that's called the WhatWeG. So WhatWeG stands for working group. Yeah, it's there. And basically, that's where a lot of development happens. So all the laser thing, request animations frame, and everything that's happened after HTML4 basically started there. And later on, the W3C recognized, OK, this is actually good, and started working on HTML5 now. And there are also W3C working groups, which are topic-specific. And on the other version, to do it is to go to mailing lists for browser vendors. And that's actually what I did with my API. So the first thing that I went to, and this is now a little bit Mozilla specific, is the WebAPI mailing list. But it turns out it's pretty much just to Firefox OS specific. So basically, I got no response, and I was sad, and yeah. So one good tip is follow-up. So what I did was I just called in they have public meetings and ask, hey, why is there no response to my thing? Isn't that interesting for you? And they just said, well, it's not our scope, so you might go to dev layout. So I sent an email there, and there was a response. And yeah, expect to fail, because my idea got rejected. So I was upset again. But the thing is, the person said, your basic point is good, just the API is bad. Here's a new API. And actually, now I would say the API that we ended up in the end is way better. Because what I tried to do was replacing the entire printing stack with some complete new API. So like, is this the web? I want to have this kind of API, but it's way better to build on top. So the way that we now do it with exposing just some kind of new callback for canvas elements fits way better in what you have on the page anyway. So this is a way better API. And the thing is, don't expect that you get it right, because there are people outside that have just more experience with all this thing. But what's important is that you're some kind of driving force and you get the idea pushed that somebody gets to. For example, for the request animation frame, the thing it got implemented was some developer at Mozilla noticed people complaining there's no real way for gaming to have a 60 frames per second callback kind of thing, because that timeout doesn't really work. So he made an API, somebody else implemented it and shipped it in Firefox 4, Beta 4, and now it's in all browsers and the game industry is happy. So it's really just making the idea go out there, and I'm late on time. So now, maybe this is where you stop. You know, you have this API and you have the feeling somebody else cares about it. But now let's go more into it. Let's code, right? So good to know. If you want to really do the coding part and really implement this in your browser, it really requires passion that you want to do this, because it's going to be a long run. Expect pain, so you want to make sure. This kind of teamwork thing, so you really got to work together with other people, because browsers turn out to be this complete beast, complex beasts, and you just don't get everything by yourself. So you got to talk to some people, and don't underestimate time consuming for getting something new in. The time-consuming thing, so there are some APIs that are pretty simple. For example, for the canvas, there used to be no way to set the dash on for lines. So if you have a line, you want to have a dash, there was no way. And then there was PDF.JS, and they said, well, we just implemented some kind of API for this. And it turns out every rendering backend has an API to set dashes for lines, right? So it turned out to be like 10 or maybe 20 lines of code for writing this kind of feature, and everybody else just worked around it all the time. But in my case, it really turns out to be some more time-consuming. The other thing is, before you start coding anything, make sure that the thing that you want to implement API is reviewed by somebody else. Because otherwise, you might implement something, you spend like a month, and then you like, here's a code dump, and they say, well, it's just not useful, and it's just, yeah, it just makes you depressive. So make sure that there's some kind of review. So okay, so now let's go. Let's implement this. But wait, so if you just implement it, there's some kind of hall of pain, I called it. So some best practices that I came up to, which would have made my life easier. So one thing is find a mentor if you want to implement this. So even if you're not used to this kind of browser, you might have really small questions that takes you hours to get started. Like, how is this working? What's the best practice for this? And if you have kind of mentor that you can approach, it's pretty good to make. The mentor might be a person that responds to your API proposal, or you just ask on our IRC channel for Gecko or for WebKit or for Chrome or wherever you want to implement it, if somebody wants to help you with doing that. And mostly, there's at least one person in each kind of topic area that's passionate about what you want to do, so it should be hard to find a mentor. Next thing is open a bug, because a bug is a good place to keep track of a process. Then maybe you want to ask for some guidance, how the code should look like and where to look up code. If there's some examples existing out there, some pointers where you should look up, and maybe also ask what is the best way to communicate with our people, whether it's IRC or mailing lists. The other thing is ask before you get depressed. So it's pretty simple to just sit in your room and code, and it doesn't work because it's C++ and whatever. And what I figured out, it's way better if you just ask a small question on IRC, and people are pretty helpful, and they make sure you don't get depressed and you get going working. Some other thing is that you can look up lots of docs and wikis out there. So for Gecko and WebKit, there's tons. How the tooling works. If there's similar code, similar bugs, like if you do Canvas implementation, there's a lot of bugs about Canvas and how it got implemented. So this might give you a feeling which code parts you got to look into, and also gives you a feeling about what people you should look out to and what people to ping on IRC. Then for docs maybe, so I mean this is not the glory of how you really do it. It's more like an idea, maybe what would help you. So things you might want to look up is build system, because you want to build a Firefox or WebKit at some point. And maybe how the memory management is done internally. They have some kind of reference counting. Then there are internal trees representations. If you work on some kind of layout thing, there's a layout tree, there's a view tree, there's a content tree, there's style content tree, and so on. And maybe just ask, do I need any of these or whatever? Then there are also coding conventions that you should look up and get a little bit used to. And also debugging turns out to be art, at least for Firefox. I could expect it's maybe better for WebKit. So for instance, GDB, who knows what GDB stands for? Okay, more. So it's a command line based debugger, and basically you type S, you hit enter, and it steps to the next line. So it's pretty dumb, but it's a pretty cool thing to work with, I found out. And also, it's some kind of new tool that I haven't played maybe otherwise. Printfs helped me a lot, because I'm a person that needs to look at what happens. So I basically wrote 5 lines of code and 20 printfs maybe, but it helped me. So the other thing is you might get stuck, and then if you get stuck, it's good to look out for what kind of people could help me there. So a good person good way to find these other people is to go to your mentor on IRC or ask, hey, I'm stuck in this area, what are the people I should approach to? And also ask when are they online, because it turns out they might be on the West Coast, so if you're thinking in this time zone, you should ping them in the evening, or they're in Japan, so in the morning, all these kind of things. Also, a good thing is get some C++ book, because you can then just read a chapter through. Okay, now we do the actual coding. I got to speed up. So one thing they come across maybe is things don't work the way you expect, and it turns sometimes out it's just a known bug in the platform since a long time, and you try to fix it because you think you broke it, but that's actually not the case. So just avoid it and say, there's a bug, I don't care. Then sometimes you can come up while you're implementing, there's an issue with the API design. So for instance, the API we had was at the beginning synchronous, but it turned out that doesn't make sense. So we changed the API, but the thing to watch out is that due to API chains with feedback or on the mailing list again, such that other people that follow the process can jump into and help out there. Try to get the API right from the start, because if you ship something on the web, and you got to change it too much later on, that's not make you a lot of friends. As said, if you come across other bugs, ignore them, file a bug, but then say, this is not my topic, because it sounds a little bit narrow-minded that you just stay on your thing, but otherwise you just spread out, and there are too much open bugs. If you're stuck, just create a diff of whatever you have, create a crash log, whatever you have, and dump it somewhere on a bug on IRC and ask for help. So I was really one patch I worked on, I really submitted crash logs, and I was, okay, I seem really to be this guy or this stupid guy that cannot continue. So I just looked at one line and said, yeah, do you call this kind of function? No, I don't. Oh yeah, now it totally makes sense. So a really small thing, but if you get stuck, really try to dump as much information as you have, because it makes people easier to get you going again. Step back sometimes, so just take a break. Is the thing that you make, doesn't make sense the way you implement it? That's what you maybe know from a normal thing. Don't question yourself. So I would say you're not dumb. It's just a huge thing to hack a browser, and just that's the way it is. So now it comes to landing these things. So if you have some code and it's more or less working and part on it, make sure you get in a feedback cycle as soon as possible. So attach some wipe, which is work in process, on a bug, and ask somebody to give feedback on this. Because that avoids that you continue in the wrong direction and you got to refactor it later on. It just makes it way more way more nice, and also it gives you more kind of team feeling because you work with some other people, and that helps you to get motivated. And then writing tests for browsers actually art, because normally you write tests in the browser, but now as you're writing for the browser, you write tests that are in the browser that testing the browser. So it's kind of meter testing writing, and there's some kind of pretty cool frameworks there. It's pretty tricky, but pretty cool. Yeah, upload wipes as often as possible. Also, yeah, so the reason why you want also to upload work in process as often as possible is if your machine dies, you have some code upware. And the other thing is, if you, for some reason, got to step away, somebody else might take a look at your code and can continue from there. And if you upload wipes pretty often, he can say, okay, what was his decision making? What happened in the meantime? And that means maybe you step back, but 3 months later, you see on Twitter, yeah, this feature landed, and you carried 90% of the work, and maybe 10% was done by someone else. For the patch file, make sure they're clean. Sometimes you got to split them up. For a reviewer that does the actual code thing, look them up and request, and also don't hesitate to change the reviewer, because sometimes turn out people are too time consumed. If something unclear, state it, because it's worse if you just continue coding and crash afterwards. If something is unclear, maybe leave a comment in the code to make sure you don't forget about it. I got to speed up even more. So now landed. Assume your patch landed. So first thing to do is a victory dance, because it's pretty awesome to get something in the browser, and it was maybe 2 months of work. Then expect fallout, so crashes. The worst thing is you have something and you worked on it, and then you see 10 people crash because of your code. But that's normal, I would say, if you write the first time. And as somebody reviewed your code, it's not just your fault. That's usual. The thing is, so some general thing, the key thing about getting this thing done is doing communication. So the thing is IRC, mailing list, phone, get the thing that's most convenient for you. If it's more time zone, spread it. The people you work with, mailing list might work better. If something's unclear, really ask, because otherwise it can get terrible. You might get kind of these messages on IRC. So you state you're a newbie, and then they gonna explain you way more. So people are really open to want to help you. If you communicate, keep it short, precise, and keep it down to the arguments, because everybody can only handle a little bit of stuff. Be open for new tools, like this testing things, different time zones to keep in mind. And also this driving force that basically you're maybe not doing the implementation, but you ping people to make sure things keep happening. It's time consuming. And communicate in the open, because other people can jump in and help you. Expect to be wrong. You've never done this maybe before, so admit it and say, okay, I was wrong, you're right, and this is the way we do it. You won't get replies within a day because these people are busy. If you don't get replies within a week, you might want to follow up again. So what's the status on the API I worked on? It's proposed on a WhatWitchy mailing list, and there's no feedback. So if you really want to help me and make me happy, so get the happy icon there, please talk to me. If you're interested in printing on the web, make it better. And maybe you got some feedback there. So that's supposed to be fun. Oh, yeah. So actually, the cool thing is you see the internals. So this gapping miss, the C++ thing that I was talking about before, you really see how this is happening. And it's crazy shit going on when it calls into the C++, and you see it, what happens. And then it goes up to JavaScript again. So it's really cool. And you also see why things are slow sometimes. Yep. And you learn C++, which is cool for some reasons. You learn new tools. There's a lot of fun community, so this is where they make jokes somewhat of themselves. You learn a lot of communication skills. And you also, if there's some small fixes that need to be done in C++, you know now how to do it, so you can do it. And don't have to write JavaScript to avoid this bug, because now you just dive into. And also the cool thing is, once you fix something in, let's say, Firefox, you're good. The code for WebKit doesn't look too different maybe, so you can fix the bug in WebKit as well, way more simpler. It's a pretty open source project, browsers, and it ships to 1 million users, so it's kind of big impact thing, and maybe something you don't do in your normal life. And you work with heroes, because these people you might talk to IRC or mail to, they basically build the web, big parts of it, and you can work with them, which is kind of, okay, that's pretty cool. So, links. To be done. I didn't have time. But if you want to have links, so I have something in my mind. Just follow me on Twitter, and I'm going to post the slides with links. Thanks. Keep rocking the open web and question and answers.